Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to our workshop today. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you. I hope you find this presentation valuable and beneficial to your research. Actually, this discussion is based on the literature and also on my experience from the study we conducted on theory use and theory borrowing in library and information science and also in ODL. I implore you to consult some of the references that is listed at the end of this work so that it will acquaint you more on why you should use theory and how it should be used. Because if you use theory, if you use it properly in your work, you find that it will have your work will have a smooth flow and you'll be able to answer your research questions and also your analysis. So looking at what we have today, our outline will have to look at theories in research and why we use theories. Then we'll also look at home-based theories and borrowed theories. And then we concentrate mainly on theory borrowing. Do we need to borrow theories? Then when do we borrow theories? And is theory borrowing specific to any discipline? Then we'll now look at the use of theory and wrong use of theory in our research. So looking at theories and methodology, these are the two pillars of research as highlighted by Gulube. You find out that we use theories to explain research variables and social realities. When you have your research, there are certain variables you want to find out its effect or influence on your study. So for you to have proper grip of it, you need theories to be able to predict what will happen if, let's say, if A is used, what will happen to B? What will be the resultant effect? So good theory advances knowledge in scientific discipline and predicts what could be. That's what you will find out. It helps you to predict. So this implies that for any discipline, it is important to use theory in research, irrespective of the origin of the discipline. Going further, you find out that theories are the cornerstone for generating research questions, hypotheses, and meanings. When you have a theory, your theory should help you to inform your research questions and also or your hypothesis and also your analysis. It acts as a lens for focusing and magnifying certain things and filter out those presumed to be noise. You need to select your variables, highlight what you want to find out from that study, and then based on that, you now focus on your main research variables. The use of theories in research writing is necessary because it explains the relationships among the concepts, and its adoption in research has continued to evolve over time. Over the years, studies have been using theory in research, in writing, either as in thesis and dissertation or in article writing. They use theories to help them explain the relationships among the concepts or the variables that are used in the study. So theory use did not start now. But what we are experiencing now is using it, borrowing from other disciplines due to the interdisciplinary nature of some of the disciplines we have. You find out there is need not to rely solely on one theory. There is need to move out or to get theory from other areas to help us to achieve our research objectives. Theories are inseparable from research, as we have highlighted before, and the importance of theory in research writing cannot be underestimated. If it is properly used, you find out that research will be useful and you make very good meaning, and you find out the flow of the research and how the result will be, and then your findings also. So it is important for relatively new interdisciplinary fields which do not have long history of theory construction and testing. Some of these new disciplines, interdisciplinary fields we have, Many of them, they don't have their own theory, but using theory from other disciplines will help them on their own field. And it's also, you find out that also using theory from other disciplines also encourage theory building. We'll get to that. Theories may be home-based or borrowed from other disciplines as a result of the absence of home-based theories. What do we mean by home-based theories? These are theories that emanate from a particular discipline. Let's take, for instance, disciplines like sociology, psychology, or information systems. They have their specific discipline. They have disciplines that originate from those areas. When they are writing their research work, if those theories are relevant to their studies, you find out that they rely on those theories from their particular discipline instead of borrowing theory from another discipline. Then when we talk of borrowed theories, these are theories developed in other disciplines and imported for use in another discipline based on the subject area of the research. By this, you find out that, taking for instance sociology, they have their own theories, like theory of diffusion of innovation theory. Maybe you have need for it. You are in library and information science, or you are in management. You have need. That theory is relevant to your study. You find out that you now import that theory from sociology and make it and use it in management. So that is what we mean by borrowing theory. You borrow a theory developed in another discipline and import it for use in another discipline based on the subject area of the research. And by doing this, you find out that that theory you are importing or you're borrowing must be relevant to your study. You don't just get any theory you like from any discipline, no. What's the relevance of that theory to your study? Will it help you to explain your research variables, formulate your research question, and then will it help you to run a very good analysis that will answer that research question you have formulated in your study? So if you find out that this theory you want to borrow will help you to achieve this end, you find out that you can make use of it. Though most writers encourage the use of home-based theories, but for the fact that we have some studies that need theory, and you find out that the theories in their particular discipline cannot answer their research questions, we have to move out and borrow theory from other disciplines. And by so doing, you encourage theory development, theory building, and also you help other disciplines, all those disciplines, to be more visible, especially those disciplines that are still new, that don't have their own theories to rely on. So it is necessary that borrowing process become explicit, purposive, and conscious. This can be accomplished only if the researcher understands the important philosophical issues at stake. That is the more reason why, as a researcher, when you're writing your research work, you need to understand your study very well. And that is why literature review is very, very important. I encourage you, before you start writing, you do a wide literature search. Read what others have written. That will help you understand your concept very well. And then you know how to handle them. And you now help you to know which theory will help you in your study to achieve your research or to set your research aim. But if you didn't do a wide search or literature study, you find out that you won't be able to pick out the important variables in your study. Theory borrowing is an inevitable and integral facet of theory development in all disciplines. You find out that some studies, when they borrow theories, either they borrow the whole variables in that theory, or some decide to take some aspects and drop some. It's not compulsory that you must borrow all the concepts when you borrow a theory. But they add new concepts. Most of the time, they modify that theory so that other people may find it useful maybe there are new ideas they've introduced, they may find it useful in their own study. So that is why it's also good that we don't just rely only on our home-based theories. We also need to borrow to know have that knowledge from other disciplines. Though that theory was developed in another context, you can apply it in another context and you find out that you now have a different or similar meaning from what you have really read before. Theory building efforts requires identifying new variables, suggesting new relationships between variables, and offering new accounts of relationships which can contribute to the research field. By so doing, you find out that introducing new variables, new relationships, you are making contribution to knowledge. So theory borrowing is also a way of contributing to existing knowledge if you do it very well. That is the most important thing, to use that theory very well. So the question now is, do we need to borrow theory? Looking at the nature of research and studies, you find out that most of our research, you have the interdisciplinary nature of research. It encourages theory borrowing, since theories are necessary in explaining research variables. Since we need theories in our research to explain our research variables, answer our research, to inform our research questions or hypotheses, there is need for us to borrow theory from other disciplines. In as much as we use that theory properly, we're able to explain the theories and also apply it in our work. These are the factors we have to look out for. Some disciplines are still evolving, and they depend on borrowing theories from other theories. Because we cannot say there is no theory in my discipline. Because of that, I cannot use theory. If it's important and if your work requires that you use theory, it's encouraged that you borrow theory from another discipline to help you achieve your research objectives. Theory borrowing can also take place as new development from established fields creep into a field. Think of the developments in technology and how they affect other fields. In such situations, you need to move out, you need to borrow from other disciplines to help you answer the research questions. Let's take, for instance, the use of technology in learning, even in ODL environments. You find out that most of our studies is done on our online platform, the use of technology. In such studies, if you're doing a research, maybe to test the perception of students, you're using certain technology, you find out that you need to understand the ease of using that technology. You find out how they will perceive the use of that technology. So in that case, you need to look at, how will I measure these variables? Which theory will help me to achieve this? So you tend to get theories maybe from information system or sociology or any discipline that you find a relevant theories that will help you answer those questions. So therefore, a researcher should know when to borrow a theory. When there is absence of discipline or home-based theory relevant to our study. The word relevant is important because we can't just take any theory we like and explain it in our study. Like some research work, you find out that a researcher will have up to 3 or 4 theories, explain what the theory means, the variables and all the rest of them. But when you check the work very well, you find out that the researcher did not even apply that theory in that work, which is not proper. So if the theory you're using, whether it's home-based theory or borrowed theory, is relevant to your study, then you know that you have to use that theory. When it is relevant, this means it can explain the variables of your study. Then where can we borrow theory? Is there any particular discipline? Maybe let's say management must borrow from education or whatever. No. You can borrow from any discipline, so in as much as the theory is relevant to the study. You are not restricted to borrow from any particular discipline, but the word relevant should guide you when you're doing that. So that when you borrow that theory must help you to explain your research variables and also answer your research questions or your hypothesis, depending on the one you used in your studies. If you're making use of research questions or hypotheses, you find out that the theory you're using will help you to achieve that answer the research questions or test your hypothesis. Then how do we borrow theory? This is an important aspect. Most studies, when you look at them, they tend to lack or overlook some of the important things involved. When you're borrowing a theory, you adapt that theory from its discipline origin. Let's take, for instance, maybe management. You borrow a theory from management. Already that theory was developed in that discipline. You want to take it to another discipline to explain your phenomenon in another context. Then when you borrow the theory, you need to explain what that theory means. Then get some literature that has really dealt on that theory, or maybe using something on that theory, explain what it's all about. Identify the variables that you need to test, the variables from your study that made you to borrow that theory. So that when you identify them, you'll now be able to use that the theory you've borrowed to formulate either your research questions or your hypothesis. The theory should inform your research questions or hypothesis, and also your data analysis. You don't just borrow a theory, explain the theory. After explaining it, explaining the variables and everything, when you look into your work, you did not apply the theory. You did not use it at all. It is not proper. It's not a good use of theory. And then another thing some of the researchers do is they can use up to 4 or 5 theories in their work. But at the end, you find out that only one is applied. It's not proper that way. What you need to do is, if you're using if you know that one theory will help you to achieve your research aim, you go for one theory. But if you have need for 2 or 3, make sure that you make use of them. Identify the variables that you need to test, and then apply it in your work so that it will help you and to achieve your aim. Using borrowed or home-based theories. Theory use means that the researcher has to identify the theory, like I said before, they intend to use, state the constructs of the theory, discuss some authors that have used the theory, and the link between the theory and the variables in the research question. The link must be established. If there is no link between the theory and the variables in your research work, you find out that that theory is not relevant. When we borrow a theory, some constructs might be added or removed from the theory. You can borrow a theory, use some of the constructs, or you can use all of them. You can remove some and add some. That means modifying the theory to suit your work. Most times there are some works you look at, you find out that they can borrow 2 theories, borrow some construct from that theory, and come up with a research model that will be present in their own work. Wrong use of theory. Just borrowing a theory, maybe mentioning the theory in the title, it does not guarantee its use, because you must state how that theory is applied or the relevance of that theory to your work. Some researchers explain theories in their work without using them to explain their variables or answering their research questions or hypotheses. That is not the good use of theory at all. Let us be well guided. When we are using a theory, we make sure that we mention the theory, explain it, or maybe in our introduction, we mention that we use maybe 1 or 2 theories, mention the theories. Then inside the work, we should make use of that theory properly. we should apply it and use it and to explain our research variables, and then answering our research questions, so that we can now conclude that we really use that theory properly. Is theory borrowing specific to any discipline? Is there any particular discipline that is maybe relies solely on borrowing theory from other disciplines, or is it a universal issue? Theory borrowing is prevalent in many disciplines. There is no specific discipline that doesn't borrow, because new knowledge and disciplines keep on evolving, and new subject areas keep on emerging. So as these new subject areas emerge, there is need also to address the issues in those areas. So in the absence of home-based theories relevant to the study, a researcher borrows from another discipline. A discipline may have many theories, but a researcher feels that they are not relevant to the study and will not help in achieving the research objectives. So you find out that in that situation, the researcher is bound to borrow from another discipline where there is a relevant theory that is necessary and will help to answer the research questions. Then another issue is a subject area of the study has influence in which discipline the theory is borrowed. That is, the subject, your research area will also inform you from which discipline you borrow theory, so that it will help you to answer explain your variables. The constructs or the variables of the study the researcher wishes to test will guide in the choice of theory to be used in the study. So these are some of the things you need that will help you, that will guide you when you want to borrow a theory. So this is an example I put here from a research work we did recently on two models for determining cloud computing adoption for web-based services. This is just to explain how a researcher can use a theory or a model, depending, because most times you find out that some studies you can also use model to explain your variables. We are looking at cloud computing in adoption of cloud computing for web-based services. So we decided to use two models, the UTAT and then technology acceptance model. These are the two we used. So when you look at the constructs, these are the constructs in our study that we need to look at. We need to look at facilitating condition, whether it will have any influence on cloud computing adoption. Then the perceived benefits, user friendliness. How is the system, how is it user friendly to our users? Then the perceived ease of use, perceived security, ease of maintenance, the maintenance of this web service we are trying to introduce. Then is flexibility, perceived flexibility, reliability, how reliable is the web-based services? And then the increased performance or production of computing adoption. So these are some of the variables in our studies we want to test out, whether it will have any influence on cloud computing adoption. This is just an example. So likewise, in your own research work, you have your topic, you identify the variables you want to, you identify your research variables. And then now you look out for what will I use? What will help me to really explain these variables? And also in my research question, how will I answer this research question? So that was why we came up with our construct from our study. This paper is already out. Also in the reference. I can also send you the copy so that you will read through it. It will really guide you and help you in analyzing your own variables, explaining your own variables in your study. So when we identified these constructs, we now made use of the two models, the UTAT and the technology acceptance model. We had so many, up to 6 hypotheses, but I just picked 3 out of it to help in explaining this. The first hypothesis we had in our study is, we said, facilitating conditions will significantly determine academic library adoption of cloud computing for web-based services. That is, the facilities available for this web-based service, whether it will have any whether it will significantly determine its adoption or not. So when we had this hypothesis, we now, from there, we formed, we got our research, we designed our questionnaire, the questions we asked to our respondents, so that they will now indicate, from their responses, we now analyze the responses they gave us. So the second one is perceived benefits will significantly determine academic libraries' adoption of cloud computing for web-based services. That is, if they perceive that it will be beneficial to them, the benefits they perceive from the benefits of these web-based services, to help them to determine whether they will go for that, adopt cloud computing for web-based services or not. But if the benefits are not there, you find out that whether it will affect adoption of cloud computing or not. So these are some of the hypotheses we stated in our studies. And then the two models, the UTAT and the technology acceptance model, help us to achieve this objective. So when we now adopted the two models, we now came up with our own research model. That's why you have this diagram here. We use the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology model, that's UTAT, and then the technology acceptance model to produce this research model that help us to test our hypothesis as we have it in the work. So when you read that study, that research article, you find out that you get more information that will be useful when you are doing your own study. So another study we did where we looked at the use of theory in research writing. This is on master's and thesis research writing, as it affects students from South Africa and Nigeria. So we looked at how they use theory in their research work. Actually, that work we looked at a period of 10 years. So we discovered that most of the theories used in that discipline, they borrow it from other disciplines. Though they have some of them, they also made use of home-based theories, that's theories of information science. And then they also borrow from other disciplines. And you find out that majority of the theories used, they are borrowed from sociology, psychology, because of the nature of the study they are doing. That was what informed the use of those theories. And if you look at information science, library and information science very well, you find out that the discipline deals more with providing service delivery to users, to their clients. And the use of technology is also important in providing these services. So this may be the reason why you find out that they use mostly theories from information system, sociology, and others. So we also looked at the first one was the results for masters. This is for masters, the areas they borrowed master's research work. Then this is for the PhD. Many of them borrowed also from information sociology and information systems. So that library science is borrowed theories does not make it maybe a lesser science than those disciplines they are borrowing theories from, no. But it's just because of the subject areas they are covering. That was what informed them borrowing the theory from from these areas. So likewise in your own research study, you are encouraged to borrow theories that will really help you to achieve your research objective. You don't just say you must use theory from your own discipline. No. What will guide you is the relevance of that theory to your research work. And that will help you make good use of the theory properly in your research work. Because if you find out that there is no link between the variables in your study and the concepts in the theory, you can't link the two of them. You find out that you won't use that theory properly. So another study is also the one we done on ODL literature. We looked at some of the research articles published in open and distance learning journals for a period of time. We discovered that they also borrow theories from other disciplines. In as much as there are also theories, ODL theories, but they still borrow from other disciplines. And these are the frequencies, how they borrow these theories. Some were borrowed many times, and even some of the ODL theories were just used maybe once or twice. So using these theories does not mean that maybe there are no theories, there are no home-based theories, but it's just because of the relevance of that theory to the research work in helping to answer the research questions. So that's why we are encouraged when we are doing our own study, we need to look out for theories that will help us to answer our research questions, irrespective of the disciplines. We shouldn't say that there is no theory in my own discipline. As a result, I will not use theory in my study. No. Read very well. Literature review is very important for us when we are doing our study. When we do literature review, you now establish the gap, know the area, the meaning, the constructs you're using, and you find out that it will help you to now decide on the theories that will guide you in formulating your research questions and also in answering your research question and explaining the variables in your studies. So I just looked at, these are two different disciplines. Looking at the theory used in these disciplines, which areas do they borrow theories? And is there any similarity in the theories they use? Though they are two different disciplines. But you find out that looking at this table, you find out that some theories borrowed in information science, they're also borrowed in ODEL. So which means theory borrowing is not specific to any discipline. And that they are borrowing from other disciplines does not make them, they are not relevant or what. No. Those in their areas, other disciplines can also borrow from them. And it's also encourage theory building, so that from there, you can develop research models that other people can use. And people can also go further to also develop theories from, to come up with new theories from the ones they've borrowed when they do further studies on that. So looking at the two tables presented before, you find out that they mostly discover that the two disciplines where they borrow theories mostly are sociology and psychology. So one can infer that they don't have more difference in their theory building, in their theory borrowing, sorry. Because when you look at ODEL and library and information science, they are multidisciplinary fields, and they center mostly on human behavioral attitude towards changes, with current trends as introduced by ICT to improve teaching, learning, research, and services delivery. Like, let's take, for instance, information science. You find out that with the introduction of technology, there keep on evolving changes in the service delivery because they seek for ways to serve their users. And then they need now to come up with services or information that will help them to provide effective service delivery to their users and to achieve their aim. So in that case, they need to carry out studies on how best they can do this. So that's why you find out that researchers from these areas, they borrow theories mostly from sociology, psychology, and information systems because of the nature of their study and then the subject areas they are covering. So the use of theories depends a lot on the subject area of the research, not necessarily on your interest or maybe the theory you like most. No, the subject area of your study, of your research should guide you in this choice of your theory use. So, having said that, you find out there are some authors that believe that theory borrowing is okay. Some also say that they don't encourage theory borrowing. Like Ochola said that library science borrowing theory from across discipline does not make it lesser science than those the theoretical framework they are using. That is true because if you're borrowing from another discipline, that does not make your own discipline a lesser science, but it's just because of the need, the relevance of that theory to your study. So we are encouraged to borrow theories, and when we are borrowing, we should be careful. Make sure that the theories that we are borrowing that are relevant to our study, and they will help us to explain our research variables and also answer our research questions. Also, further writers stating that researchers need to be aware of the role of theory in research. Like we have seen earlier that theories help us in answering our research questions, and it's also the glue that holds the study. If theories are properly used in the work, they help for the smooth flow of the research. So the role of the theory in research the role of theory in research is important because we need theories to achieve our research objectives. It's like somebody making a cake. That's what I can liken research writing to. You find out that you need so many ingredients to make sure you produce a very good cake, depending on the type of cake you're baking. If you miss any of them, you find out that the taste will differ. But if you put the ingredients and apply them properly, use the right quantity, you find out that you get a very good result. So likewise in theory use, we should be careful. We should be aware that when we are using theory, that theory should be relevant to our study. And it should help us to explain our variables and achieve our research purpose. We shouldn't just bring a theory, drop it, and without proper explanation, without applying it in our work, we say we have used the theory. No. So in that way, you find out that if you use the theory properly, it will help for the smooth flow of your research work. And your readers will also appreciate what you did. So borrowing theories from other disciplines is not a mark of weakness of a discipline, no. It's just to help us to do our research, to answer our research questions, and also to explain the variables in our study. These are some of the views of some writers on theory borrowing. Different writers, they have their own views. Some are, like I said, some of them are in support, but some of them encourage using a home-based theory. Then the question now you ask yourself is, if I'm asked to use only home-based theories, what if I don't have home-based theories that are relevant to my study. What do I do? So that is a very big question they need to address, because you cannot rely only on your home-based theory. There is need for that interdisciplinary research. You need to borrow ideas from other disciplines and apply it in your own discipline to find out if it will also give the same results. Though there may be believers and skeptics in theory borrowing, they will not prevent disciplines from borrowing theory. We have to borrow theories to help us in our research, and also in theory building. Because if you don't borrow out ideas like that to bring in new ones, you find out that it still remains the way it is. But once you bring in new ideas, there will be change. And then that change will result to a new knowledge others can also use. So the question I would like to place here is, we should not use theory because others use this in their study. Like I said, in that study, we looked at thesis and dissertation from library and information science work. Maybe some of them were using theory because they just explained the theory without properly applying it in their study. Maybe they've read their previous work, they saw that they used theory, they just copied it without properly applying it. It should not be so. We shouldn't just use theory because others use it in their study. Or because maybe from our research guideline, the outline, our research thesis and dissertation outline in our department, it is expected that you should have a theory. You now enforce theory into the work. No. If you look at the work, there is no need, it's not relevant that you use theory. You don't need to do that. Make sure that the theory you're using, you apply it. It will help you to explain your research variables. Sometimes people use a conceptual model. They are not the same thing as theory, quite well, but you can also use a conceptual framework in your study to explain if that is better for you. Or you want to impress your reviewers or readers. You said, okay, let me explain theory, or let me infuse theory in my work. That will not help you to achieve anything, or to show that your work is better than others. It's not proper at all. So let us be guided when we are using theory, when we are borrowing, or even when we are using home-based theory from our discipline. We should know the construct, the variables we are handling, the variables we are treating in our work. Then we should know the theories that will help us explain those variables very well. Then that theory should inform our research questions or hypotheses, also help us in our analysis, so that when we now finish our work, in your discussion, you can now explain how that theory, whether that theory really helped you to achieve your aim in that study or not, the relevance of that theory in your work. That's the theoretical importance of the theory you use. So that is one thing we have to look at. We have to be very careful, do proper literature review. It's very, very necessary, because most times you find out that researchers, when they have a topic, they start writing without doing proper literature review. You have to make use of research articles written by other papers. You stand on the shoulders of a giant to see far, so that when you read wide, it will now help you to pick out your research variables. And when you have your research variables, you now know the theories that we use in your work. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that good theories advances knowledge. When you use your theories properly, when you use them properly in your work, you find out that it helps in advancing knowledge. You can also develop your own model from borrowing other people's own idea, but it all depends on how you use it. Well, if you didn't use it properly, you find out that you won't contribute anything. So in conclusion with this statement, it says you have to do the right thing. It's very important that we do the right thing when we are borrowing theory. We have to borrow the right theory and use it properly in our work. So when we do the right thing, you never know what result will come out from your action. You may come out with a model, you may come out contribute with theory building, but if you are not doing anything, there will not be any results. So let us do something and do it properly. Let us be guided when we are borrowing a theory. Like I believe many of you have gone far in your research work. Many have used the theory, or many are still writing. But when we are borrowing, when we are using theory, when we are writing our research work, let us first of all do proper literature search. When we do proper literature search, we now read and know, have a grip of the variables of our study. Then we can now apply that knowledge from other people's work in our own work. Borrow the theories if we need to borrow theories to explain our research work. And then in the end, you find out that your work will come out fine, that your work will now have meaning and contribute to knowledge. But if we just take any theory we like, put it in the work, mention it or explain it or without applying it, you find out that you've not done much. So let us read more and then know how to use theory. Like I've explained, that for you to say you've used that theory properly, you must use it to explain your research variables. The theory, there must be a link between the concepts of that theory and your own variables. You must link the two of them. And then those that are reading your work will find it relevant and useful, and you have a smooth flow in your own research work. So like I said, I have so many references I attach here, and even the 2 models modification for determining cloud computing adoption. I will encourage you also to look at that article, because it will really help you to know how you can use the construct from the theory in forming your own research questions or your own hypothesis. So likewise, other works too, even the work on to borrow or not to borrow is the question. The work we published, I can also send you that. You can also read more, because it will help you to know. Some students, they just mention theories in their work without proper explanation. It should not be so. We have to explain it, the theory, what it's all about, what are we picking from the theories. Are we taking the whole constructs or are we leaving some? So that if you're taking the whole variables, you identify the ones you're using, and then how relevant it is to your study, and how it will help you to answer your research questions or achieve your research objective, achieve your research aim. So by so doing, you find out that you've really used that theory in your work, and it will make meaning in your own studies. Thank you.